Detective James Rodriguez would never forget the night he met Emma Martinez. It was one of those calls that changed a cop forever, the kind that haunted dreams and made even 20-year veterans question their faith in humanity. It was 11:47 p.m. on a cold Thursday in October when the 911 call came through. Neighbors reported screaming, crashes, and then terrifying silence from apartment 3B on Maple Street. Rodriguez and his partner, Officer Linda Hayes, arrived within 6 minutes. The apartment door hung partially open, kicked in from the inside. What they found turned Rodriguez's stomach. Maria Martinez, just 28 years old, lay unconscious on the blood-spattered kitchen floor. Dishes were shattered across the linoleum. A chair was broken into pieces. The wall had a fist-sized hole punched through the drywall. And standing over Maria, his knuckles split and bleeding, was Marcus Webb, her boyfriend of 8 months, claiming she'd slipped and fallen. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the sound Rodriguez heard coming from the bedroom closet, a small, almost imperceptible whimpering, like a wounded animal trying not to be found. Hayes called for an ambulance while Rodriguez moved slowly toward the sound, his heart hammering. He opened the closet door carefully, and there, wedged between winter coats and shoe boxes, was 3-year-old Emma. The little girl's enormous brown eyes stared up at him, wide with terror. Her pajamas were splattered with what Rodriguez prayed wasn't her mother's blood. Her tiny body trembled uncontrollably, but she made no sound, not a cry, not a word, not even a whimper now that she'd been discovered. "Hey there, sweetheart," Rodriguez had whispered, crouching down to her level. "I'm here to help, you're safe now." Emma didn't respond, didn't even blink. Rodriguez had 3 kids of his own. He knew how chatty 3-year-olds could be, endless questions, made-up songs, constant chatter. The silence radiating from this child was unnatural, wrong. It sent chills down his spine. That was 6 months ago. Now, Detective Rodriguez sat in the observation room of the Children's Advocacy Center, watching through one-way glass as Emma sat across from Dr. Sarah Chen for their 17th session. The little girl looked healthier. Her grandmother had taken custody, and Emma was eating properly, sleeping through the night sometimes. But she still hadn't spoken, not one single word. Dr. Chen, one of the best child psychologists in the state, had tried everything in her considerable arsenal. Play therapy, art therapy, sand tray therapy, music therapy. They'd used puppets, dolls, drawing materials, and interactive games. Emma would occasionally participate, moving objects around, nodding or shaking her head to yes or no questions. But words, nothing. It was as if that terrible night had stolen her voice completely. "She's locked inside her own mind," Dr. Chen had explained to Rodriguez last week, her frustration evident despite her professional composure. Emma witnessed something so traumatic that her brain essentially shut down her ability to communicate. It's called selective mutism triggered by acute trauma. She may speak again someday, but I can't tell you when. Could be months, could be years. Rodriguez rubbed his tired eyes. They didn't have years. They barely had days. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for the following Monday, just 10 days away. Marcus Webb had been charged with aggravated domestic assault, child endangerment, and attempted murder. Maria Martinez had survived, but she'd suffered a traumatic brain injury and couldn't remember the details of that night. The physical evidence was compelling. Webb's DNA under Maria's fingernails, his fingerprints on her throat, his blood on the broken dishes. But defense attorney Robert Morrison was good. Too good. He'd already filed motions challenging the physical evidence, claiming it was consistent with Maria attacking Webb first and him defending himself. Morrison had investigators digging into Maria's past, painting her as unstable, possibly violent. Without Emma's testimony, without that innocent child's account of what she witnessed, the case could fall apart. And if Webb walked free, Rodriguez knew exactly what would happen. Webb would disappear, or worse, he'd go after Maria to finish what he'd started. Men like Webb didn't like loose ends. They didn't like witnesses. District Attorney Patricia Gomez had been blunt in their meeting yesterday. "James, I'll do everything I can with what we have, but a 3-year-old who can't or won't speak. The judge might not even allow her in the courtroom. And if she does, Morrison will argue she's incompetent to testify. We need her to talk. We need her to tell us what happened in her own words." Rodriguez looked back through the glass. Emma was sitting at a small table staring at a dollhouse Dr. Chen had set up. The doctor gently placed a male action figure near a female doll, watching for Emma's reaction. The little girl's face went pale. Her hands clenched into fists, but still, silence. "What are we going to do?" Linda Hayes asked, appearing beside Rodriguez with 2 cups of coffee. She'd been with him that night, had helped wrap Emma in a blanket and carry her to the ambulance. Hayes had daughters of her own and had been checking on Emma's case daily. "That monster is going to walk, isn't he?" Rodriguez took the coffee but didn't drink it. His mind was racing through possibilities, all of them dead ends. Court-appointed advocates, already involved, different therapists. Dr. Chen was the best. Hypnosis, not allowed for children in their state. Testimony from other witnesses, none existed. Emma was the only one who'd seen everything. "There has to be something," Rodriguez muttered, more to himself than to Hayes. "Some way to reach her, some way to make her feel safe enough to tell us what she saw." He watched as Emma pushed the male action figure away from the dollhouse with such force it clattered across the table onto the floor. Dr. Chen made a note on her pad. Emma's small chest rose and fell rapidly. She was clearly upset, clearly trying to communicate something. But without words, without her voice, it wasn't enough for court. The clock on the wall ticked loudly in the observation room. 10 days until the hearing. 240 hours to find a miracle. Rodriguez had no idea that miracle would come with 4 legs, a wagging tail, and kind brown eyes. But first, he had to think outside the box, way outside any box he'd ever considered before. Detective James Rodriguez sat at his desk at 2:00 a.m., surrounded by empty coffee cups and case files he'd read 100 times. The station was quiet except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the occasional radio chatter from dispatch. He couldn't sleep, couldn't stop thinking about Emma's silent, terrified face. His computer screen glowed in the darkness, showing search results he'd been scrolling through for hours. Helping traumatized children testify, selective mutism therapy, child witness programs. Most of it was material he'd already reviewed with Dr. Chen. Nothing new, nothing that would work in 10 days. He was about to give up when a link at the bottom of page 7 caught his eye. Courthouse facility dogs help child abuse victims find their voice. Rodriguez clicked it, his exhausted eyes scanning the article. It was from a small town in Washington state, describing a program where specially trained dogs accompanied traumatized children during testimony. The article featured a photo of a golden retriever sitting calmly beside a young girl in a courtroom. According to the piece, the dog's presence had helped the child feel safe enough to testify against her abuser for the first time after months of silence. His heart began to race. Could it really be that simple? He clicked another link, then another, a case in Seattle, another in Maine, one in Colorado, story after story of children who couldn't speak, wouldn't speak, until a trained facility dog sat beside them. These weren't pets or emotional support animals. They were professionally trained dogs, often former or current police canines, certified to work in courtrooms and therapeutic settings. Rodriguez grabbed his phone and started taking notes. By 4:00 a.m., he'd compiled a list of 17 successful cases where facility dogs had made the difference between justice and a failed prosecution. By 6:00 a.m., he'd found 3 programs within 200 miles of their city. And by 8:00 a.m., when District Attorney Patricia Gomez arrived at her office, Rodriguez was waiting at her door with a thick folder and determination blazing in his bloodshot eyes. "A dog," Gomez stared at him like he'd suggested bringing a circus elephant into her courtroom. She set down her briefcase and coffee with exaggerated care. "James, did you sleep at all last night?" "Patricia, just look at this." Rodriguez followed her into her office, spreading printouts across her pristine desk. "Courthouse facility dogs. They're being used in 37 states. The success rate with traumatized child witnesses is over 80%. You want to bring a dog to interview a traumatized toddler who hasn't spoken in half a year," Gomez interrupted, picking up one of the articles with obvious skepticism. "And then what? March it into Judge Brennan's courtroom. Do you know how Morrison would tear us apart? He'd call it a circus, a publicity stunt, emotional manipulation of the jury." "These are legitimate programs," Rodriguez insisted, pulling out his phone to show her more research. "The dogs are specifically trained. They're certified. Courts have upheld their use in dozens of cases. Look, here's one from the state Supreme Court in New Jersey that explicitly approved facility dogs for child witnesses." Gomez sat down slowly, her expression shifting from dismissive to curious. She began reading the case law Rodriguez had found. Her perfectly manicured nail tapped against her desk as she processed the information. "Even if this works, and that's a massive if, where are we going to find one of these magical dogs in 9 days?" she finally asked. Rodriguez smiled for the first time in weeks. "Our K-9 unit." 3 hours later, Rodriguez and Gomez stood in the parking lot of the police K-9 training facility on the outskirts of town. The sound of barking echoed from the kennels. Sergeant Mike Thompson, a barrel-chested man with 30 years on the force, approached them with a mixture of curiosity and confusion. "Dispatch said you needed to talk about one of my dogs for a case," Thompson said, shaking their hands. "We've got 3 certified for narcotics, 2 for explosives, and Duke just finished his patrol certification." "We need something different," Rodriguez explained. "Have you heard of courthouse facility dogs?" Thompson's weathered face broke into a surprised grin. "Rex." "Rex?" Gomez asked. "Come on, I'll show you." Thompson led them past the training grounds where officers worked with German shepherds on attack commands and building searches. But he didn't stop at those impressive, intimidating animals. Instead, he walked to a quieter section of the facility, where a separate building stood apart from the main kennels. Inside, the atmosphere was completely different. Softer lighting, comfortable furniture, and lying on a cushioned mat near the window was the most beautiful German shepherd Rodriguez had ever seen. The dog was large and powerful with the classic black and tan markings of his breed. But there was something different about him, something in his eyes. Where most police K-9s had an intense, focused gaze that could intimidate suspects, this dog's eyes were gentle, warm, almost impossibly kind. "This is Rex," Thompson said with obvious pride. "He's 5 years old, finished his basic police K-9 certification 3 years ago, narcotics detection, suspect apprehension, the works. But during his final evaluation, the assessors noticed something unusual. Rex was excellent at the technical work, but his real gift was something else entirely." "What do you mean?" Gomez asked, watching as Rex calmly stood and walked over to them, his tail wagging in a slow, friendly rhythm. "Most K-9s are trained to be intimidating when they need to be. Rex can do that too, but his natural temperament is different. He's calm, intuitive. During a domestic violence call about 2 years ago, there was a terrified 6-year-old hiding under a bed who wouldn't come out for anyone. Rex crawled under there, laid down beside her, and just waited. 20 minutes later, the girl came out holding onto his collar. After that, I started researching facility dog programs." Rodriguez knelt down, and Rex approached him immediately, sitting calmly and allowing the detective to pet him. The dog's dark eyes seemed to look right through him, radiating a sense of peace that Rodriguez hadn't felt in months. "He's been through the certification?" Gomez asked, her professional skepticism warring with the hope in her voice. "Completed it 4 months ago," Thompson confirmed, pulling out a folder. Full facility dog certification from the Courthouse Dogs Foundation. He's legally qualified to work with traumatized witnesses in therapeutic and courtroom settings. I've been looking for the right case to deploy him, but most prosecutors don't know these programs exist. Rodriguez stood up, looking at Gomez. This is it. This is how we reach Emma. Gomez studied Rex carefully. The dog sat perfectly still, his ears alert but relaxed, his entire demeanor radiating calm confidence. She'd built her career on evidence, on facts, on things she could control in a courtroom. Putting her faith in a dog seemed insane. But then she thought about Emma, that tiny girl trapped in silence while her mother's attacker prepared to walk free. Sometimes justice required taking risks. When can he meet her? Gomez finally asked. Thompson smiled. How about tomorrow morning? Rodriguez felt something he hadn't felt since that terrible night in the apartment. Hope. Real, tangible hope. Rex's tail wagged once, as if he understood that his most important mission was about to begin. Dr. Sarah Chen arrived at her office an hour early on Friday morning, her stomach twisted in knots. Detective Rodriguez had called her the previous evening with what sounded like the most absurd idea she'd heard in her 15-year career: introducing a police dog to Emma Martinez. "Sarah, I know it sounds crazy," Rodriguez had said, his voice crackling with exhaustion and desperate hope. "But I've done the research. These facility dogs have an 80% success rate with traumatized children. We have 8 days until the preliminary hearing. What do we have to lose?" Everything, Chen had thought. They could lose the fragile trust Emma had built. They could traumatize her further. They could set back months of careful therapeutic work. But Rodriguez was right about one thing: they were out of options. Now Chen rearranged her therapy room for the 3rd time, moving the toy boxes, adjusting the lighting, second-guessing every decision. She'd cleared away anything that might startle or frighten Emma. The room needed to feel safe, controlled, familiar. At 9:00 a.m. sharp, her secretary buzzed the intercom. "Dr. Chen, they're here." Chen took a deep breath and opened her office door. In the waiting room stood Sergeant Mike Thompson in civilian clothes, jeans and a polo shirt, deliberately non-threatening. Beside him sat the most magnificent German shepherd she'd ever seen. The dog was alert but calm, his intelligent eyes scanning the room without anxiety or aggression. "Dr. Chen, this is Rex," Thompson said quietly. "He knows he's working. He'll follow your lead completely." Chen knelt down, studying the dog carefully. Rex met her gaze with remarkable steadiness. She'd worked with therapy animals before dogs, even a few cats and rabbits, but there was something different about this one. Something in his bearing suggested he understood the gravity of what they were attempting. "Has he worked with children before?" Chen asked. 6 cases so far, all successful. The youngest was 4 years old. Thompson handed her a folder containing Rex's certifications and case summaries. "He's trained to remain perfectly still when needed, to respond to the child's cues rather than forcing interaction. He won't bark, won't jump, won't do anything that might frighten her." Chen nodded, her professional skepticism beginning to waver. "Emma arrives in 30 minutes. Rex should already be in the room when she gets here. I don't want her to feel ambushed by his entrance. Can he handle staying calm and still for that long?" Thompson smiled. "Doc, he once stayed motionless beside a 7-year-old for 2.5 hours during a deposition. Patience is his superpower." 20 minutes later, Rex lay on a soft mat in the corner of Chen's therapy room, about 8 feet from Emma's usual spot. Thompson sat outside in the waiting area with Rodriguez and Linda Hayes, all of them watching through the one-way observation glass. The tension was suffocating. "What if this makes everything worse?" Hayes whispered. Rodriguez didn't answer. He couldn't. His entire career, his faith in justice, Emma's future, everything rode on what happened in the next hour. At 9:30 a.m., Emma arrived with her grandmother, Rosa Martinez. The elderly woman looked exhausted, aged 10 years in the 6 months since her daughter's beating. Emma held her grandmother's hand, wearing her favorite purple dress with butterflies on it. Her dark hair was pulled into 2 neat braids. Chen greeted them warmly at the door. "Good morning, Emma. We have someone special visiting today. Would you like to meet him?" Emma's eyes widened slightly, the most expression Chen had seen from her in weeks. The little girl nodded once. Chen led them into the therapy room. Emma's gaze immediately locked onto Rex. She froze in the doorway, her entire body going rigid. In the observation room, Rodriguez's heart sank. But then something unexpected happened. Rex didn't move, didn't stand up or approach or even wag his tail enthusiastically like most dogs would when seeing a child. He simply lay there, his head resting on his paws, and looked at Emma with those impossibly gentle brown eyes. It was as if he understood that she needed space, needed time, needed to feel in control of the situation. Emma took one hesitant step into the room, then another. Her grandmother sat in a chair near the door, giving her granddaughter space but remaining close enough for comfort. Chen moved to her desk, pulling out a coloring book but keeping her attention on the little girl. For 5 minutes, nothing happened. Emma stood near the toy chest, stealing glances at Rex. The dog remained perfectly still, just breathing slowly, his presence steady and unthreatening. 10 minutes passed, 15. In the observation room, Hayes shifted nervously. Should someone? "Wait," Thompson cut her off quietly. "Just wait. Rex knows what he's doing." 20 minutes in, Emma took 3 steps closer to the dog. Rex's tail gave the smallest wag, just the tip barely moving. Emma stopped, watching him carefully. Another 5 minutes of stillness. Then Emma moved again, this time closing half the distance between them. She sat down on the floor, still several feet away, her purple dress pooling around her. Rex's ears perked up slightly, but he didn't lift his head. Chen held her breath. Rosa Martinez had tears streaming silently down her weathered face. Rodriguez pressed his palm against the observation glass, willing this to work, praying to any god who might listen. 30 minutes into the session, Emma spoke, not with words but with movement. She extended one tiny hand toward Rex, her arm stretched out as far as it would reach. Her fingers trembled in the air between them, reaching, wanting, but afraid. Rex understood. Slowly, so slowly it seemed like he was moving through honey, he lifted his head. Not enough to seem threatening, just enough to make himself more accessible. His tail wagged twice, gentle as a whisper. Emma's grandmother gasped softly. Chen's pen clattered to her desk. The little girl moved forward 6 inches, then a foot. Then she was right beside Rex, her hand hovering just above his head. In the observation room, 3 seasoned law enforcement professionals held their collective breath. Emma's fingers touched Rex's fur. The contact lasted only a second before she pulled back, but it was everything. Rex's tail wagged again, still gentle, still calm. He made a soft sound, not quite a whine, more like a contented sigh, and rested his head back on his paws, giving Emma space to process what had just happened. The little girl sat back on her heels, staring at her own hand like it belonged to someone else. Then something miraculous. The corner of her mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. Closer than anyone had seen in 6 months. She reached out again. This time her hand stayed on Rex's head for 3 seconds, 5 seconds, 10. She stroked his soft fur and Rex remained perfectly still, letting her explore at her own pace. "Oh my God," Hayes whispered in the observation room. "It's working." Rodriguez couldn't speak, couldn't move. He just watched as Emma Martinez, the silent, broken little girl he'd found in that closet, began to cautiously pet the dog who might save her life. 45 minutes into the session, Emma lay down on the mat beside Rex, not quite touching him but close. The dog's steady breathing seemed to calm something deep inside her. Her eyes, always so wide and frightened, began to close. Dr. Chen caught Rodriguez's eye through the glass and nodded slowly. It wasn't a miracle yet. Emma still hadn't spoken, but for the first time in 6 months she'd reached out, she'd connected, she'd trusted. It was a beginning. And in 8 days, they'd need it to be enough. As the session ended and Rosa carefully collected her granddaughter, Emma did something that made every adult in the building freeze. At the doorway, she turned back to look at Rex one more time. The dog's tail wagged, and Emma, silent, traumatized Emma, waved goodbye. Just a tiny flutter of her fingers. But it was communication, it was connection, it was hope. "Same time tomorrow," Thompson asked Chen quietly. "Same time tomorrow," she confirmed, "and the day after, and every day until that hearing." Rodriguez walked out of the Children's Advocacy Center into the bright morning sunlight, and for the first time since that terrible October night, he believed they might actually win this case. Rex had done in 1 hour what months of traditional therapy couldn't accomplish. Now they just needed a miracle to go with their breakthrough. Over the next 6 days, Emma Martinez and Rex became inseparable during their daily sessions. What started as cautious touching evolved into something deeper, a bond that defied explanation, but was undeniable to everyone who witnessed it. On Saturday, Emma sat beside Rex for 20 minutes, her small hand resting on his back while Dr. Chen read a picture book aloud. The little girl's breathing synchronized with the dog's steady rhythm. Sunday, she hugged him for the first time, her thin arms barely reaching around his broad chest. Monday, she giggled, actually giggled, when Rex's tail tickled her face. Detective Rodriguez watched every session through the observation glass, documenting Emma's progress with meticulous notes. The preliminary hearing was now just 3 days away. Emma was clearly healing, clearly connecting, but she still hadn't spoken, not a single word. "James, she's making incredible progress," Dr. Chen had told him after Monday's session, "but I can't promise she'll be ready to testify. Speaking in a safe therapy room with a dog is completely different from speaking in a courtroom with her attacker staring at her." Rodriguez knew she was right, but they'd come too far to give up now. Tuesday morning arrived cold and gray, with rain pelting against the windows of the Children's Advocacy Center. Emma arrived wearing rain boots decorated with cartoon puppies, and for the first time, she walked into the building without holding her grandmother's hand. Rosa Martinez noticed, her eyes filling with tears of cautious hope. "She dressed herself this morning," Rosa whispered to Dr. Chen. "First time since that night. She picked the boots because she said," Rosa's voice caught. "Wait, she didn't say anything. She pointed at them. 'I'm sorry, I'm so tired I'm imagining things.'" But Chen wondered, was Emma trying to communicate? Was she closer to breaking through than they realized? Rex was already in the therapy room lying in his usual spot, but today Sergeant Thompson had brought something new, a soft tennis ball. "Sometimes play helps traumatized kids open up," he'd explained to Chen. "Rex is trained for gentle play, nothing aggressive or startling." When Emma entered the room, her face lit up at seeing Rex. She ran to him, actually ran, and threw herself beside him on the mat. Rex's tail wagged enthusiastically, and he lifted his head to gently nuzzle her cheek. "Emma," Dr. Chen said softly, "Rex brought a toy today. Would you like to play with him?" Emma's eyes widened. Chen rolled the tennis ball slowly across the floor. It stopped about 2 feet from Emma. The little girl looked at the ball, then at Rex, then back at the ball. Slowly, carefully, she picked it up. Rex sat up, his attention focused entirely on Emma. His tail wagged, his ears perked forward. Every part of his body language said, "I'm ready to play with you." Emma held the ball uncertainly. She'd never played with Rex before. Their interactions had always been quiet, gentle, calm. This was different. This was active. This was normal. The kind of normal a 3-year-old should have with a dog. In the observation room, Rodriguez leaned forward, his coffee forgotten. Linda Hayes stood beside him, her hand pressed against her mouth. Rosa Martinez was there too, praying silently in Spanish. Emma drew her arm back and tossed the ball. It didn't go far. Her little arm didn't have much strength, but Rex bounded after it anyway, his movements careful and controlled. He picked up the ball gently in his mouth and trotted back to Emma, dropping it in her lap. And then a miracle, Emma laughed. The sound was rusty, unpracticed, but unmistakably joyful. She laughed and clapped her hands together. Rex's tail wagged harder, creating a small windstorm in the therapy room. Again, Emma's grandmother gasped from the observation room. Did she just? "SHH," Thompson cautioned gently. "Don't react, let it happen naturally." Emma threw the ball again. Rex retrieved it again. She threw it a third time, and this time when Rex brought it back, he did something new. He lay down and rolled onto his back, his paws in the air, exposing his belly in the ultimate gesture of trust and playfulness. Emma giggled again. The sound was growing stronger, more confident. She reached out and rubbed Rex's belly, and the big German shepherd's tail thumped against the floor with pure joy. They played for 15 minutes, the longest sustained interaction Emma had maintained since the trauma. Dr. Chen watched in amazement, barely breathing, afraid to disrupt the magic unfolding before her. Finally, Emma tired. She lay down beside Rex, who had rolled back onto his stomach. Her small body curled against his larger frame. His head rested near hers. She could feel his heartbeat, steady and strong. She could feel his breathing, calm and even. In that moment, something inside Emma's locked-away mind shifted. Rex had given her something she desperately needed: safety without words, comfort without demands, love without conditions. He'd shown her that the world could still be good, that she could still trust, that she could still be a normal little girl who played and laughed. Emma's hand moved to stroke Rex's soft ears. The dog's eyes were half closed, content and peaceful. She studied his face, the gentle curve of his muzzle, the wisdom in his dark eyes, the slight graying around his snout that gave him a distinguished appearance. "Good boy," Emma whispered. The words were so soft that Dr. Chen almost missed them. Almost. Her pen froze mid-note. Her heart stopped. Had she just? "Good boy," Emma said again, slightly louder this time. Her small hand continued stroking Rex's fur. "Good boy, Rex." In the observation room, Rosa Martinez collapsed into a chair, sobbing. Linda Hayes grabbed Rodriguez's arm to steady herself. Thompson's weathered face cracked into a smile so wide it looked painful. Dr. Chen remained perfectly still, tears streaming down her face. She didn't want to speak, didn't want to do anything that might break this precious, miraculous moment. "You're such a good boy," Emma continued, her voice gaining strength with each word. "The bestest boy, my friend." Rex's tail thumped once, twice, 3 times against the floor. He turned his head to look at Emma with those impossibly kind eyes, and if a dog could smile, he was smiling. Emma sat up suddenly, her little face animated in a way no one had seen in 6 months. She looked directly at Dr. Chen, actual eye contact, deliberate and meaningful. "Rex is good," Emma announced, her voice small but clear. "Rex is my friend. Rex makes me not scared." Dr. Chen couldn't help herself. Tears flowed freely now as she nodded. "Yes, sweetheart, Rex is very good. And you know what? You're very brave." Emma considered this. Brave. "So brave," Chen confirmed. "The bravest girl I know." Emma looked at Rex again, drawing strength from his presence. "Rex is brave too." "Yes, he is. We brave together." Chen's heart nearly burst. "Yes, Emma, you're brave together." Rodriguez bolted from the observation room, nearly tripping in his haste. He burst into the therapy room, then stopped, remembering protocol. But Emma saw him, recognized him, and didn't shrink away. "The policeman," Emma said, pointing at Rodriguez. That's right, Dr. Chen encouraged gently. Detective Rodriguez, he's the one who found you, he helped you. Emma studied Rodriguez with those enormous brown eyes. She looked at Rex, then back at the detective, making connections, processing, remembering. Bad man hurt Mama, Emma said suddenly, her voice dropping to barely a whisper. I was scared. Rodriguez knelt down, his voice thick with emotion. I know, sweetheart, and I need you to tell people what you saw. Can you do that? Can you be brave and tell the truth? Emma's hand found Rex's fur again, anchoring herself. If Rex comes. Rex will be right beside you, Rodriguez promised. The whole time. Emma nodded slowly. Okay, I tell. Rex helps me be brave. In that moment, Detective James Rodriguez knew they had their witness. After 6 months of silence, 2 words to a gentle dog had unlocked everything. Good boy had changed the world. Now they just needed to get Emma into that courtroom and pray that her courage held when she faced the monster from her nightmares. The emergency hearing in Judge Margaret Brennan's chambers was scheduled for Wednesday afternoon, exactly 48 hours before Emma's preliminary hearing. District Attorney Patricia Gomez sat on one side of the judge's massive oak desk, her briefcase bulging with case law and precedents. Across from her, defense attorney Robert Morrison looked like a coiled snake ready to strike. Judge Brennan, a stern woman in her early 60s with silver hair pulled into a tight bun, looked exhausted. She'd been on the bench for 17 years and thought she'd seen everything. Apparently not. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, Judge Brennan said, removing her reading glasses to rub her eyes. Ms. Gomez, you want to bring a police dog into my courtroom to sit with a 3-year-old witness during testimony. A certified facility dog, Your Honor, Gomez corrected respectfully. Rex is professionally trained and legally certified to assist traumatized witnesses in therapeutic and courtroom settings. I have his complete certification documentation, including. Objection, Morrison exploded, half rising from his chair. Your Honor, this is the most outrageous attempt at emotional manipulation I've encountered in 23 years of practice. A cute child with a puppy. The jury will convict my client based on sympathy alone, completely ignoring the actual evidence. Mr. Morrison, this isn't a trial yet, so there's no jury to object to, Judge Brennan said dryly. And Rex is hardly a puppy. He's a 70-pound German shepherd. Even worse, Morrison shot back. A police dog. The jury will associate my client with criminals and danger before a single word of testimony is heard. This is prejudicial, inflammatory, and completely inadmissible under. Your Honor, if I may, Gomez interrupted calmly, sliding a thick document across the desk. People v. Chenault, California Court of Appeals, 2011. The court explicitly approved the use of a facility dog during child testimony, finding that it aided the child's ability to testify without unduly prejudicing the defendant. Since then, 37 states have allowed facility dogs in courtrooms under similar circumstances. Morrison snatched the document, his face reddening as he scanned it. California is not this state, Your Honor, and these cases involve older children, 7, 8, 9 years old, not toddlers who can barely string together a sentence. Emma Martinez can speak, Gomez countered. She broke her silence just yesterday after 6 months of selective mutism, and she did it because of Rex. Without that dog, Your Honor, we have no witness. Without a witness, a violent offender walks free. Oh, how convenient, Morrison's voice dripped with sarcasm. 6 months of silence and suddenly, miraculously, she speaks to a dog. Your Honor, this reeks of coaching, of manipulation. The prosecution is using this animal to fabricate testimony from a suggestible child. That's a serious accusation, Mr. Morrison, Judge Brennan warned, her tone sharp. Do you have any evidence of coaching? Morrison faltered slightly. Well, no, but... Then I suggest you stick to legal arguments rather than unfounded conspiracy theories. Gomez seized the momentum. Your Honor, I have Dr. Sarah Chen's complete clinical documentation showing Emma's therapeutic progress. I have video recordings of every session with Rex. There has been no coaching whatsoever. Emma is finally able to communicate because she feels safe. Taking that safety away would be cruel and potentially re-traumatizing. What's cruel is denying my client a fair trial. Morrison slammed his palm on the desk. Your Honor, I move to exclude all testimony from this child, with or without a dog. She's 3 years old, 3. She doesn't understand the difference between truth and fantasy. She doesn't understand the oath. She can't be cross-examined effectively. Her testimony is inherently unreliable. Judge Brennan leaned back in her leather chair, her fingers steepled under her chin. The silence stretched for nearly a minute while both attorneys held their breath. Ms. Gomez, the judge finally said, I've read the cases you've cited. I'm aware that facility dogs have been successfully used in other jurisdictions. However, Mr. Morrison raises valid concerns about potential prejudice. How do you propose we mitigate that? Gomez had prepared for this. Rex will be positioned beside Emma at floor level, mostly hidden from the jury's direct view. He won't be in police regalia, no vest, no badge, nothing identifying him as law enforcement. The jury will be instructed that his presence is purely to help the child feel comfortable, with no bearing on guilt or innocence. Sergeant Thompson will be present but seated in the gallery, not beside Emma. Your Honor, that's not enough, Morrison insisted. The mere presence of a dog creates sympathy. Studies show that. Studies also show that traumatized children have a constitutional right to testify in a manner that doesn't re-traumatize them. Gomez fired back. The Sixth Amendment gives Mr. Webb the right to confront his accuser, but it doesn't give him the right to silence that accuser through intimidation or fear. Morrison's jaw clenched. My client has every right to face his accuser without theatrical props designed to. Enough! Judge Brennan's gavel cracked like a gunshot. Both attorneys fell silent. I'm going to take a 15-minute recess to review these materials. When I return, I'll make my ruling. Both of you wait outside. The hallway outside Judge Brennan's chambers felt like a pressure cooker. Gomez paced, her heels clicking against the marble floor. Detective Rodriguez sat on a bench, his head in his hands. Linda Hayes brought him coffee he didn't drink. Sergeant Thompson stood by the window with Rex, the dog calm despite the tension radiating from every human in the corridor. Morrison stood apart on his phone with his client. Through the glass partition, they could see him gesturing angrily. Marcus Webb's voice carried through the phone's speaker. You better fix this, Morrison. I'm not going to prison because of a brat and a damn dog. Emma's grandmother, Rosa Martinez, sat in the corner, rosary beads threaded through her trembling fingers. Her daughter Maria was still in rehabilitation, learning to walk again, learning to remember her own name. If Webb walked free, Rosa knew exactly what would happen. Men like him always came back to finish what they'd started. What if she says no? Hayes whispered to Rodriguez. What if Brennan excludes Emma's testimony entirely? Rodriguez didn't answer. He couldn't. The possibility was too terrible to contemplate. At exactly 3:47 p.m., Judge Brennan's clerk opened the chamber doors. The judge is ready for you. They filed back in. Gomez's hands were steady but her heart hammered. Morrison looked smug, confident. Judge Brennan sat behind her desk, her face an unreadable mask. I've reviewed the case law from multiple jurisdictions, the judge began. I've considered the arguments from both sides. This is not an easy decision. On one hand, Mr. Morrison is correct that the presence of a dog could potentially create sympathy that might influence a jury's judgment. On the other hand, Ms. Gomez is equally correct that a traumatized child has the right to testify in a manner that doesn't cause further psychological harm. Morrison leaned forward, sensing victory. However, Judge Brennan continued, her voice hardening, I took an oath to uphold justice. And justice means giving every witness, regardless of age, a fair opportunity to be heard. I've read Dr. Chen's reports. I've seen the transformation in Emma Martinez. Without Rex, this child cannot testify. With Rex, she can." Gomez's breath caught. "Therefore, I'm ruling that Rex will be permitted in the courtroom during Emma's testimony, subject to the following strict conditions. First, the dog will be positioned beside the witness at floor level, mostly out of the jury's sight line. Second, Rex will wear no police identification or equipment. Third, I will give explicit jury instructions that the dog's presence is solely for the comfort of the witness and has no bearing on the defendant's guilt or innocence. Fourth, if at any point the dog's presence appears to be prejudicing the jury, I reserve the right to remove him immediately." "Your Honor, I must object," Morrison began. "Your objection is noted for the record, Mr. Morrison. My ruling stands." Judge Brennan's gavel fell with finality. "We convene for the preliminary hearing Friday morning at 9:00 a.m. Ms. Gomez, I expect that child to be prepared. This court adjourns." Rodriguez's legs nearly gave out from relief. Hayes grabbed his arm to steady him. Gomez gathered her materials with shaking hands, hardly believing they'd won. But Morrison wasn't finished. As they left the chambers, he cornered Gomez in the hallway, his voice low and venomous. "You think you've won? Wait until I cross-examine that little girl. Dog or no dog, I'll show the court exactly how unreliable a 3-year-old witness is. By the time I'm done, your case will be in pieces." Gomez met his glare without flinching. "Emma Martinez is the bravest person in this courthouse, Mr. Morrison, and unlike your client, she's going to tell the truth." As Morrison stormed away, Rodriguez approached Gomez. "Friday morning, 40 hours. Is Emma really ready for this?" Gomez looked at Rex, who sat calmly beside Thompson, his gentle eyes seeming to understand the weight of what was coming. "She has to be," Gomez said quietly, "because this is her only chance at justice." Friday morning arrived with brilliant sunshine that seemed to mock the darkness of what lay ahead. Emma Martinez woke at 5:30 a.m. in her grandmother's small apartment, already wearing her favorite purple butterfly dress. She hadn't taken it off since Rosa had helped her into it the night before, insisting on sleeping in it despite her grandmother's protests. "Mija, you'll wrinkle it," Rosa had worried, but Emma was adamant. "Rex likes butterflies," the little girl had said with the absolute certainty only a 3-year-old could possess. "Rex told me." Now, as dawn broke over the city, Rosa brushed Emma's dark hair into 2 careful braids, her hands trembling so badly she had to start over twice. Through the thin apartment walls, they could hear their neighbor's television broadcasting the morning news. The case had attracted media attention. Toddler to testify against mother's alleged attacker with help of police dog, the headline screamed. Rosa turned off their own TV. Emma didn't need to see that. Didn't need the pressure of knowing the whole city was watching. "Are you scared, Mija?" Rosa asked gently, tying a purple ribbon at the end of one braid. Emma considered the question seriously, her little face scrunched in concentration. "A little scared," she admitted, "but Rex will be there. Rex makes me brave." Rosa pulled her granddaughter into a fierce hug, breathing in the scent of her baby's shampoo, praying to every saint she could name that this precious child would have the strength to face her monster. The courthouse was already swarming with people when they arrived at 8:15 a.m. News vans lined the street. Reporters shouted questions that Rosa ignored, her arm wrapped protectively around Emma's small shoulders. Detective Rodriguez and Officer Hayes met them at the side entrance, forming a human shield around the little girl. "How's our brave witness doing?" Rodriguez asked, kneeling to Emma's level. Emma's eyes were wide, darting nervously at all the strangers and cameras. "Where's Rex?" she asked, her voice small and frightened. "He's already inside waiting for you," Rodriguez promised. "Sergeant Thompson is with him. They're in a special room just for you." The courthouse was a massive, intimidating building with marble floors that echoed every footstep and high ceilings that made even adults feel small. Emma's hand found her grandmother's and gripped it tightly. They walked through security, past curious courthouse employees who whispered and pointed, down a long corridor that seemed to stretch forever. Finally, they reached a small witness preparation room. Rodriguez opened the door, and Emma's entire face transformed. Rex, the German shepherd, was lying calmly on a cushioned mat, but his tail began wagging the instant he saw Emma. The little girl released her grandmother's hand and ran to him, throwing her arms around his neck. Rex nuzzled her gently, his warm presence immediately calming her visible anxiety. "Good boy," Emma whispered into his fur. "You came, you really came." "I told you he would," Sergeant Thompson said with a smile. He was dressed in a suit rather than his uniform, another deliberate choice to keep Rex's appearance as non-threatening as possible. Rex never breaks a promise. Dr. Sarah Chen entered the room carrying a small bag with comfort items, Emma's favorite stuffed rabbit, some crayons, a juice box. "Good morning, sweetheart. Are you ready to talk to the people in the courtroom? Remember, we practiced this. You'll sit in a special chair, Rex will be right beside you, and you just tell the truth about what you saw." Emma nodded against Rex's fur, but didn't let go of him. District Attorney Patricia Gomez arrived next, her professional armor firmly in place but her eyes soft when she looked at Emma. "You're the strongest little girl I've ever met," she told Emma quietly. "All you have to do is tell the truth. Can you do that?" "If Rex stays." "Rex stays the entire time, I promise." At 8:55 a.m., a bailiff knocked on the door. "Court convenes in 5 minutes. Judge Brennan wants the witness and the dog in position before the defendant is brought in." Rodriguez felt his stomach drop. This was it. Months of work, weeks of therapy, days of legal battles, all coming down to the next hour. They formed a small procession. Sergeant Thompson leading with Rex on a simple leather leash, Emma walking beside the dog with her hand resting on his back, Dr. Chen and Rosa following closely behind, and Rodriguez bringing up the rear. The courtroom doors seemed massive, heavy as the gates of justice itself. Inside, the courtroom was already filled. Spectators packed the gallery. Court reporters sat ready. The jury box stood empty. This was just a preliminary hearing, but it would determine whether the case went to trial. Judge Brennan sat behind her bench, her expression stern but not unkind. And there at the defense table sat Marcus Webb. Emma saw him and stopped dead in her tracks. Her entire body went rigid. Her breathing became rapid and shallow. All the color drained from her face. For a horrible moment, Rodriguez thought she would bolt, that 6 months of healing would shatter in an instant. But then Rex did something extraordinary. The dog moved closer to Emma, pressing his solid body against her legs. He looked up at her with those impossibly kind brown eyes and made a soft sound, not quite a whine, more like a gentle reassurance. His tail wagged slowly. His presence said, "I'm here. You're safe. We're brave together." Emma's hand tightened in his fur. She took a shaky breath, then another. Her eyes moved from Webb to Rex, from her nightmare to her protector. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, I can do it." The witness area had been specially modified. Instead of the traditional elevated witness box, a comfortable child-sized chair sat at floor level, positioned so Emma could see the attorneys and judge but not have to stare directly at Marcus Webb unless specifically asked to identify him. Beside the chair was a large cushioned mat for Rex. Emma climbed into the chair, and Rex immediately lay down beside her, his head resting close enough that she could touch him. Dr. Chen sat in a nearby chair, close enough to intervene if needed but far enough to let Emma testify independently. The courtroom fell into absolute silence. Even the spectators seemed to hold their breath. This tiny girl in a purple butterfly dress with a German shepherd at her side represented something powerful, innocence confronting evil, vulnerability finding courage, truth demanding to be heard. Judge Brennan spoke gently, her normally stern voice softened for the child before her. "Good morning, Emma. My name is Judge Brennan. Do you know why you're here today?" Emma's voice was barely audible. "To tell about the bad man." "That's right, and this is Rex." The judge gestured to the dog. "Yes, Rex is my friend. He helps me be brave." "Well, Rex can stay right there with you the whole time. Now, Emma, do you promise to tell the truth today? Do you know what the truth is?" Emma nodded seriously. "Truth is what really happened, not pretend, not stories, what I saw with my eyes." Judge Brennan looked impressed. "That's exactly right. Are you ready to begin?" Emma's hand found Rex's fur. The dog's tail thumped once against the floor. She looked at her grandmother in the gallery, at Dr. Chen beside her, at Detective Rodriguez standing near the back, and finally at Rex, her protector, her courage, her voice. "I'm ready," Emma said. Marcus Webb leaned back in his chair with a smirk, clearly believing no 3-year-old could possibly harm his case. Defense attorney Robert Morrison shuffled his papers confidently, preparing to tear apart a toddler's testimony. They had no idea what was coming. Patricia Gomez stood, approached the witness area slowly, and smiled at Emma with genuine warmth. "Hi, Emma. I'm Ms. Gomez. I'm going to ask you some questions, okay? Take your time. There's no rush." Emma nodded, her fingers buried in Rex's soft fur. "Can you tell me about the night when the bad man hurt your mama?" The courtroom leaned forward collectively. Rex's steady breathing filled the silence, and Emma Martinez, with her hand on a gentle dog's back, prepared to finally speak her truth. Emma Martinez's small voice trembled in the cavernous courtroom. Her hand remained buried in Rex's fur, drawing strength from his warm, solid presence. District Attorney Patricia Gomez knelt nearby, keeping her body language non-threatening, her voice gentle as morning rain. "Emma, can you tell me about the night when someone hurt your mama?" Gomez asked softly. The little girl's eyes darted to Marcus Webb, then quickly away. Her breathing quickened. Rex shifted slightly, pressing his head closer to her leg. The subtle movement seemed to anchor her back to safety. "It was nighttime," Emma began, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was supposed to be sleeping, but I heard yelling, loud yelling, scary yelling." "Who was yelling, sweetheart?" "Mama and the bad man." Emma's fingers tightened in Rex's fur. The dog remained perfectly still, but his tail gave one gentle wag of encouragement. "What happened next?" "I got out of bed. I was scared for Mama. I walked to the hallway and I peeked." Emma's voice grew even smaller. "I saw them in the kitchen." "What did you see in the kitchen, Emma?" The little girl's eyes filled with tears. Her lip quivered. For a moment, it seemed she might shut down completely, retreating back into the silence that had protected her for 6 months. In the gallery, Rosa Martinez clutched her rosary so tightly the beads cut into her palm. But then Rex did something remarkable. The German shepherd slowly, carefully lifted his head and rested his muzzle on Emma's lap. The weight was comforting, grounding. His dark eyes looked up at her with such pure understanding that something in Emma's frightened heart steadied. She took a shaky breath. The bad man was really, really mad. He was yelling mean words. Mama was crying. She said, "Please stop, and you're scaring Emma," but he didn't stop. "What did the bad man do?" Gomez asked, her own voice thick with emotion. "He pushed Mama hard. She fell down and hit her head on the counter. There was a big crash sound. Dishes broke everywhere." Emma's tears spilled over now, running down her small cheeks. "Mama was on the floor. She was bleeding, so much red. I wanted to help her, but I was too scared." The courtroom was utterly silent except for Emma's testimony. Several jurors in the jury box wait. Rodriguez realized this was just a preliminary hearing. The gallery spectators were completely still. Even the court reporter's fingers had slowed on her stenography machine, as if reluctant to interrupt. "Did the bad man see you watching, Emma?" "Yes," the word came out as barely a breath. "He looked at me. His eyes were scary. He said bad words. He said if I told anyone he would. Emma's voice broke completely. Take your time, sweetheart. You're doing so well. Rex is right here with you. Emma buried her face in Rex's fur for a moment, and the dog remained perfectly motionless, letting her take all the time she needed. When she lifted her head, her expression had changed. Something determined had replaced the fear. He said he would hurt Mama more, and hurt Grandma Rosa, and hurt me. Emma's voice was stronger now. He said nobody would believe a stupid baby anyway. Marcus Webb shifted in his seat, his smirk faltering. Defense attorney Morrison scribbled furious notes. Emma, this is very important, Gomez said carefully. Do you see the bad man here in this courtroom today? This was the moment everything hinged on. The identification. Emma's hand stilled in Rex's fur. She looked at her grandmother. She looked at Dr. Chen. She looked at Rex, whose steady gaze seemed to say, "You can do this. I'm right here." Then Emma Martinez, 3 years old, looked directly across the courtroom at Marcus Webb. Her small finger lifted and pointed with absolute certainty. "Him," she said clearly. "That's the bad man. He hurt my mama. He made me scared. That's him." Webb's face flushed dark red. Morrison's pen snapped in his grip. The gallery erupted in whispers until Judge Brennan's gavel cracked down. "Thank you, Emma. You've been incredibly brave." Gomez returned to her seat, her part finished. Now came the difficult part, cross-examination. Robert Morrison stood slowly, adjusting his expensive tie. His strategy was clear: appear gentle while systematically destroying a toddler's credibility. He approached Emma with an exaggerated smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Hi there, Emma. My name is Mr. Morrison. I just want to ask you a few questions, okay?" Emma's entire body tensed. Rex's ears pricked forward, sensing her distress. "Emma, you're 3 years old, right?" "Yes," she whispered. "And 3-year-olds sometimes get confused, don't they? Sometimes they have bad dreams and think the dreams really happened." "Objection," Gomez stood. "Counsel is leading the witness and attempting to confuse a child witness." "Sustained," Judge Brennan ruled. "Mr. Morrison, rephrase or move on." Morrison's smile tightened. "Emma, did anyone tell you what to say today? Did the police detective or the nice lady with the dog tell you what words to use?" "No," Emma said, her voice small but clear. "I'm telling what I saw with my eyes." "But Emma, it was dark, wasn't it? And you were scared. Maybe you didn't see clearly, maybe." "I saw," Emma's voice rose, surprising everyone including herself. Rex shifted closer, his presence supportive but not controlling. "I saw the bad man push Mama. I saw her fall. I saw the blood. I was there. I saw it." Her small chest heaved with emotion. Tears streamed down her face. But she didn't look away from Morrison, didn't retreat into silence. The dog beside her had given her something precious, the courage to speak her truth even when someone tried to take it away. Morrison realized his strategy was backfiring. The more he pushed, the more credible Emma became. Her raw emotion, her specific details, her unwavering certainty, these weren't the words of a coached child. These were the words of a traumatized witness who had finally found her voice. "When the bad man looked at you, how far away was he?" Morrison tried a different approach. Emma looked thoughtful. "From here to there." She pointed to a spot about 10 feet away. "I saw his face good, real good, it was him." "But Emma, couldn't it have been?" "It was him," Emma shouted, her small voice echoing in the courtroom. "Why don't you believe me? I'm telling the truth. Mama fell down. She was sleeping but not sleeping. There was blood everywhere, and he did it." Her finger pointed at Webb again with devastating accuracy. Morrison stepped back, clearly rattled. Judge Brennan leaned forward. "Mr. Morrison, do you have any further questions for this witness?" Morrison looked at Emma, this tiny girl in a purple dress with a dog at her side, this child who had just demolished his entire defense strategy with nothing but the truth, and made a calculation. Pushing harder would only make him look like a bully and Emma look more sympathetic. "No further questions, Your Honor." "The witness may step down," Judge Brennan said gently. Then, in a move that surprised the entire courtroom, the judge added, "Emma, you were very brave today. Thank you for telling us what you saw." Emma slid out of the chair, her legs shaky. She wrapped both arms around Rex's neck, and the German shepherd stood carefully, supporting her weight. They walked together back toward Dr. Chen and Rosa, Emma's hand never leaving Rex's fur. As they passed the defense table, Marcus Webb leaned forward and hissed just loud enough for Emma to hear, "You little." Rex's transformation was instantaneous. The gentle therapy dog vanished, replaced by the trained police K9. He positioned himself between Webb and Emma, his body language suddenly protective and commanding. A low warning sound, not quite a growl, rumbled from his chest. "Mr. Webb," Judge Brennan's voice cracked like thunder. "One more word and you'll be held in contempt. Bailiff, ensure the defendant maintains appropriate distance from the witness." Webb fell back in his chair, his face pale. He'd made a critical mistake, revealing his true nature in front of the judge. His carefully constructed facade of the wrongly accused boyfriend had shattered. Emma was quickly ushered from the courtroom, Rex once again gentle and calm at her side. In the hallway, she collapsed into her grandmother's arms, sobbing with exhaustion and relief. "You did it, Mija," Rosa wept, holding her precious granddaughter. "You were so brave, so brave." Emma pulled back, looking up at her grandmother with those enormous eyes. "Did I do good, Grandma? Did I help Mama?" "You did perfect, my angel, perfect." Emma turned to Rex, wrapping her arms around his neck one more time. "Good boy," she whispered. "The bestest, bravest good boy. We did it together." Rex's tail wagged, and in that moment, everyone in the hallway knew they'd witnessed something extraordinary. A 3-year-old girl and a gentle dog had stood together against evil and spoken truth to power. And truth, as it turned out, was stronger than any lie. Judge Margaret Brennan didn't need to deliberate long. After Emma's testimony concluded, she called for a brief recess, but everyone in the courtroom knew what was coming. 40 minutes later, when court reconvened, her expression was granite hard as she delivered her ruling. Having heard the testimony of the witness and reviewed all evidence presented, this court finds sufficient probable cause to bind over the defendant Marcus Webb for trial on all charges: aggravated domestic assault, attempted murder, and child endangerment. Her gavel fell with the weight of justice. The defendant will remain in custody without bail. Trial date is set for 60 days from today. Marcus Webb's face contorted with rage. He lunged from his seat, shouting obscenities, until 3 bailiffs wrestled him down and dragged him from the courtroom. His threats echoed down the hallway even as he disappeared into custody. Defense attorney Robert Morrison gathered his papers in stunned silence. He'd been so certain he could break a 3-year-old on the stand. Instead, he'd watched her courage, and a remarkable dog, dismantle his entire strategy. Outside the courtroom, Detective James Rodriguez found Emma and her grandmother in the witness room. The little girl was curled against Rex, exhausted but peaceful. When she saw Rodriguez, she gave him a tiny smile. "Did we win?" Emma asked. "Is Mama safe now?" Rodriguez knelt beside her, his eyes bright with emotion. "Yes, sweetheart. The bad man is going away for a very long time. You were the bravest witness I've ever seen. You saved your mama." Emma nodded solemnly, processing this in the way only a 3-year-old could. Then she looked at Rex with pure adoration. "Rex saved me first. He helped me find my words again." 6 weeks later, Marcus Webb accepted a plea deal rather than face Emma's testimony at trial again. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison without possibility of parole. District Attorney Patricia Gomez called it one of the most satisfying verdicts of her career. But the real victory was happening far from any courtroom. Emma Martinez was healing. She attended preschool now, making friends and learning her letters. She still had nightmares sometimes, still flinched at loud noises, still struggled with trust. Dr. Sarah Chen continued therapy sessions twice a week. Healing from trauma, Chen explained to Rosa, wasn't linear. There would be setbacks and struggles. But Emma was talking, laughing, playing, being a little girl again. And once a week, every week, Sergeant Mike Thompson brought Rex to visit. Maria Martinez, Emma's mother, was healing too. The brain injury had stolen some memories, and she walked with a slight limp now, but she was alive. She'd moved in with Rosa temporarily, and the 3 generations of Martinez women were rebuilding their lives together, one day at a time. The case attracted national attention. News outlets across the country ran stories about the toddler and her police dog. Legal journals published articles analyzing the precedent. Advocacy groups celebrated the outcome while pushing for broader acceptance of facility dogs in courtrooms. 3 months after the hearing, State Representative Linda Chen, no relation to Dr. Sarah Chen, introduced legislation formally recognizing courthouse facility dogs in their state. She'd been inspired by Emma's case and was determined that other traumatized witnesses would have the same support. Emma's Law, as it became known, passed unanimously in both chambers. At the signing ceremony, the governor invited Emma, Rosa, Rex, and Sergeant Thompson to attend. Emma wore her purple butterfly dress, now slightly too small but still her favorite, and stood beside Rex as cameras flashed. "This little girl showed us all what courage looks like," the governor said, his voice thick with emotion. "And this remarkable dog showed us that justice sometimes needs 4 legs and a big heart." When asked to say a few words, Emma stepped up to the microphone. The room fell silent. She looked at Rex, who sat calmly beside her, then spoke in her clear, small voice. "Bad things happened to me and Mama. I was too scared to talk, but Rex helped me be brave. He helped me tell the truth. Now other kids won't have to be scared alone. They can have a Rex too." She paused, then added with the pure logic of a child, "Everyone should have a Rex." The room erupted in applause. There wasn't a dry eye in the chamber. 2 years passed. Emma turned 5 years old, a vibrant kindergartner who loved art class and couldn't stop talking about everything under the sun. The trauma hadn't vanished, it never fully does, but it no longer defined her. She was thriving. Rex, now 7 years old, had assisted in 34 cases since Emma's. His gentle presence had helped unlock the voices of dozens of traumatized witnesses, children and adults alike. He'd become something of a local celebrity, though he remained completely unaware of his fame. To Rex, it was simple. Children needed help, and he helped them. On a sunny Saturday afternoon in October, the community center hosted a retirement ceremony for Rex. At 7, he wasn't old by human standards, but police dogs retired earlier than pets. Thompson wanted Rex to enjoy his golden years without the stress of active duty. The gymnasium was packed with people whose lives Rex had touched, prosecutors and judges, social workers and therapists, and witnesses, so many witnesses, who'd found their courage with Rex by their side. Emma arrived wearing a new purple dress, this one covered in butterflies and dogs. The moment she entered, she scanned the crowd and spotted him. "Rex," she squealed, her voice echoing off the gymnasium walls. She took off running, her pigtails flying behind her. Rex, lying peacefully beside Thompson on the small stage, perked up immediately. His tail began wagging with such enthusiasm his entire back end wiggled. When Emma reached him, she threw herself at him with the full force of a 5-year-old's love. "I missed you so much," Emma declared, wrapping her arms around his neck. "Guess what? I can read now, and I drew you a picture, and Mama is all better, and I told my whole class about how you're the best good boy in the universe." Rex's tail thumped against the floor like a drum. He nuzzled Emma's cheek, and she giggled, that beautiful, carefree sound that had been stolen for so long but had returned in full force. Rosa and Maria stood nearby, both women crying happy tears. Detective Rodriguez attended with his own family, his 3 kids insisting on meeting the famous dog from Daddy's stories. Dr. Chen was there, marveling at the transformation in her former patient. Patricia Gomez, who'd successfully prosecuted 19 cases with Rex's assistance, gave a speech about justice and compassion. But the most moving moment came when Sergeant Thompson called Emma to the stage. 2 years ago, Thompson told the crowd, Rex and Emma showed us something profound. They showed us that courage isn't about being unafraid, it's about facing your fears with the right support beside you. Emma, Rex is retiring from official duty, but we'd like to give you something. He handed Emma a photograph. Rex lying beside her in the courtroom, her small hand buried in his fur, taken by a court photographer during her testimony. This is the moment everything changed, Thompson said. The moment you found your voice. The moment justice became possible. We want you to remember that you did that, Emma. Rex helped, but the courage was yours. Emma studied the photograph, touching it gently. When she looked up, her eyes were wise beyond her 5 years. Rex gave me brave, she said simply, and I'm gonna keep being brave forever. The gymnasium erupted in applause. Emma hugged Rex one more time, whispering in his ear, "You're the bestest good boy in the whole world. Thank you for saving me." Rex's tail wagged, and if dogs could smile, he was definitely smiling. As the ceremony ended and people filed out into the sunshine, Rodriguez stood with Thompson watching Emma play with Rex in the grass outside. The little girl threw a tennis ball, the same one from those early therapy sessions, and Rex bounded after it with the enthusiasm of a puppy. "You know what the amazing thing is," Rodriguez said. 2 words, that's all it took. 2 words to a dog and everything changed. Thompson nodded. "Good boy," the most powerful word she could have said. "No," Rodriguez corrected, his eyes on Emma's joyful face. "The most powerful words were the ones that came after. I saw it. That's him. I'm telling the truth." Rex gave her the courage to say those words, to speak her truth, to demand justice. They watched as Emma collapsed beside Rex on the grass, both of them breathing hard from playing. The little girl rested her head on the dog's side, just like she had in those early therapy sessions. But now there was no fear in her eyes, only love, only joy, only the bright future of a child who'd survived the worst and found her voice again. "Sometimes," Thompson said quietly, "the best police work isn't catching the bad guys. It's giving the good people the courage to speak up." Rodriguez smiled. "And sometimes the best detective has 4 legs and a wagging tail." Emma's laughter rang across the park as Rex licked her face. It was the sound of healing, the sound of justice, the sound of a little girl who'd been broken but refused to stay that way. 2 words to a police dog had changed everything in court. But countless words afterward, words of truth, words of courage, words of survival, had changed everything in life. And in the end, that was the real victory. The end.